In recent years, Serbia has experienced a significant influx of Russian immigrants, with over 30,000 Russians claiming temporary residence in the country. This growing presence has led to the informal term, Mini Russia, being coined, symbolizing the Russian diaspora's cultural, economic, and social influence in Serbia. The phenomenon is particularly notable in the context of the geopolitical tensions between Russia and the West, largely due to the Russo-Ukrainian War, which has forced many Russians to seek refuge in more politically neutral or sympathetic countries. Serbia, a historically close ally of Russia, has become a natural destination for many of these migrants. The rise of this community poses an interesting case for analysis, reflecting the intersections of geopolitics, cultural affinity, and the practical realities of displacement. This video aims to explore the reasons behind the Russian migration to Serbia, the socio-political implications of this new Russian diaspora, the economic impacts, and the potential long-term effects on Serbia's domestic and international policies. Historical and cultural ties between Serbia and Russia. To understand why Serbia has become a favored destination for Russian immigrants, it is important to recognize the deep historical and cultural ties between the two countries. Both Serbia and Russia are predominantly Slavic and Orthodox Christian nations, which has fostered a long-standing sense of shared identity. These connections have been strengthened over centuries through cultural exchanges, religious affiliations, and mutual support in various conflicts, most notably during the Balkan Wars and World War I. Politically, Russia has often been seen as a protector of Serbia's interests, particularly in opposition to Western influence. This was evident during the Kosovo conflict in the late 1990s, where Russia backed Serbia's position on the territorial dispute. The political alignment between the two nations has been reinforced by a mutual distrust of NATO and other Western institutions. Russia's opposition to the recognition of Kosovo as an independent state has further solidified its role as a key ally of Serbia. These historical ties laid the groundwork for modern political cooperation, which explains why Serbia, unlike many European countries, has not joined the Western sanctions against Russia in response to the invasion of Ukraine. This political stance has made Serbia an attractive destination for Russians seeking to escape the increasingly repressive environment at home or the economic fallout from the war. The push and pull factors of Russian migration. The migration of over 30,000 Russians to Serbia is driven by a complex interplay of push and pull factors, both of which are crucial to understanding the phenomenon. Push factors. The most significant push factor for Russian migration to Serbia is the war in Ukraine and the subsequent crackdown on political dissent within Russia. Since the invasion in February 2022, Russia has seen an exodus of citizens, particularly those who oppose the war or fear conscription. The government's suppression of dissent, censorship of independent media, and the growing influence of state propaganda have created an environment where many Russians feel their freedoms are increasingly restricted. Economic sanctions imposed by the West have also contributed to this outflow. With international businesses pulling out of Russia, financial instability, and the collapse of the ruble, many Russians have sought more stable environments for work and investment. For those in industries such as technology, media, and the arts, relocating has become a means of preserving professional opportunities and avoiding the limitations of living under a sanctioned economy. Pull factors. On the other hand, Serbia offers a relatively welcoming environment for these migrants. Firstly, Serbia's historical neutrality in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, as well as its refusal to align with EU and US sanctions, creates a political atmosphere where Russians feel less ostracized. Furthermore, Serbia's visa policies make it easier for Russians to travel and settle temporarily. Culturally, Serbia's Orthodox Christian and Slavic heritage offers a sense of familiarity for Russian migrants. The language barrier, while present, is not insurmountable due to the shared linguistic roots between Serbian and Russian. Many Russians have reported feeling a cultural affinity with Serbia, which helps ease the process of integration. Economically, Serbia has become an appealing destination for Russian entrepreneurs and professionals. The cost of living in Serbia is relatively low compared to Western Europe, and the country offers opportunities for investment, particularly in real estate and technology sectors. Many Russian tech companies, for instance, have relocated their operations to Serbia, taking advantage of its skilled workforce, favorable business environment, and access to European markets. Economic impacts of Russian migration on Serbia. The influx of Russians into Serbia has had significant economic impacts, both positive and negative, which are shaping the country's economic landscape. Positive impacts. One of the most notable positive impacts has been the investment in Serbia's real estate market. Wealthy Russians have been purchasing property in major Serbian cities such as Belgrade, Novi Sad, and Nis, leading to a surge in housing demand. This has contributed to an increase in property values and a boom in the construction industry. For Serbia, which is still recovering from the economic struggles of the 1990s, this injection of capital has been a welcome boost. The arrival of Russian professionals, particularly in the technology sector, has also had a positive effect on the Serbian economy. Many Russian IT companies have relocated to Serbia, bringing with them jobs and expertise. This has helped to position Serbia as a growing hub for technology and innovation in the region. The presence of these companies has created new employment opportunities for local Serbians and has fostered knowledge transfer between Russian and Serbian professionals. Additionally, the increase in consumer spending by Russian migrants has bolstered local businesses, particularly in the hospitality and service sectors. Russian expatriates are contributing to the growth of restaurants, cafes, and cultural venues, many of which cater specifically to this new demographic. Negative impacts. However, the rapid influx of Russians has also led to some economic challenges. The surge in demand for housing, while beneficial for property developers and investors, has also driven up rental prices in major cities. For many Serbians, particularly those with lower incomes, this has made housing less affordable. The cost of living in Belgrade and other cities has risen, which has exacerbated existing inequalities within Serbian society. There is also the concern that the Russian diaspora, particularly its wealthier members, may dominate certain sectors of the economy, potentially marginalizing local Serbian businesses. The competition for resources and opportunities could create tension between the local population and the new arrivals, particularly if the benefits of the migration are not distributed evenly. Social and cultural integration of the Russian diaspora. The social and cultural integration of the Russian diaspora into Serbian society is another critical aspect of the mini-Russia phenomenon. While the historical and cultural ties between the two nations have facilitated a relatively smooth integration process, there are still challenges to be addressed. Cultural affinity and acceptance. One of the reasons why Russians have been able to integrate relatively easily into Serbian society is the cultural affinity between the two nations. Shared religious beliefs, similar linguistic roots, and a common Slavic heritage have created a sense of brotherhood between the Russian immigrants and their Serbian hosts. This has been particularly evident in the way Russians have participated in cultural and religious events in Serbia, such as Orthodox Christian festivals and Slavic heritage celebrations. In many ways, Russians in Serbia have sought to preserve their own cultural identity while also embracing aspects of Serbian culture. Russian language media outlets, cultural centers, and schools have been established in major cities, allowing Russians to maintain a connection to their homeland. At the same time, many Russian migrants have expressed a desire to learn the Serbian language and integrate into local communities. Challenges of integration. Despite these efforts at integration, there are still challenges that arise from the sudden growth of the Russian diaspora. One of the main challenges is the language barrier. While Serbian and Russian share linguistic similarities, they are not mutually intelligible, and many Russians face difficulties in learning Serbian. This has created a divide in some communities, where Russian-speaking enclaves have formed, leading to a degree of social segregation. Furthermore, there is the issue of economic disparity. Many of the Russians who have migrated to Serbia are relatively wealthy compared to the average Serbian citizen. This has created a perception that Russians are buying their way into Serbian society, which has led to some resentment, particularly among lower-income Serbians who feel excluded from the economic benefits of this migration. The rise in housing prices and the cost of living has also fueled this discontent. There are also concerns about the potential for political polarization within Serbia as a result of the Russian migration. While Serbia has historically maintained close ties with Russia, the growing presence of Russians in the country could influence Serbia's foreign policy decisions. This could lead to tensions within Serbia, particularly among those who favor closer integration with the European Union and the West. Geopolitical implications of the Russian presence in Serbia. The rise of mini-Russia in Serbia has significant geopolitical implications, particularly in the context of the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and the broader tensions between Russia and the West. Serbia's strategic position in the Balkans makes it a key player in this geopolitical struggle, and the influx of Russian migrants could have long-term consequences for its foreign policy and international relations. Serbia's neutrality in the Russo-Ukrainian War. One of the most important geopolitical aspects of the Russian migration to Serbia is the country's neutrality in the Russo-Ukrainian War. Serbia has refused to impose sanctions on Russia and has maintained diplomatic relations with Moscow, despite pressure from the European Union and the United States. This neutrality has made Serbia an attractive destination for Russians fleeing the consequences of the war, and it has positioned Serbia as one of the few European countries where Russians can live relatively free from the stigma associated with their government's actions. However, Serbia's neutrality is not without its challenges. As a candidate for European Union membership, Serbia faces increasing pressure to align its foreign policy with that of the EU. The growing presence of Russians in Serbia could complicate this process, as the country may find itself caught between its historical ties to Russia and its aspirations for closer integration with Europe. Potential influence of the Russian diaspora on Serbian politics. The Russian diaspora in Serbia could also play a role in shaping the country's domestic politics. As the Russian community grows in size and economic influence, it may begin to exert pressure on Serbian policymakers to maintain close relations with Moscow. This could lead to a more pronounced pro-Russian stance in Serbian foreign policy, which could strain relations with the European Union and the West. At the same time, the presence of Russian businesses and entrepreneurs in Serbia could lead to greater economic cooperation between the two countries, further deepening the ties between Belgrade and Moscow. This could make it more difficult for Serbia to balance its relationships with both Russia and the West, potentially leading to increased tensions within the country. The emergence of mini-Russia in Serbia is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that reflects the broader geopolitical, economic, and cultural dynamics of the current era. The migration of over 30,000 Russians to Serbia is driven by a combination of push and pull factors, including the war in Ukraine, political repression in Russia, and Serbia's relatively welcoming environment. While the Russian diaspora has brought economic benefits to Serbia, particularly in the real estate and technology sectors, it has also created challenges, such as rising housing prices and social tensions. The cultural and historical ties between the two nations have facilitated the integration of Russians into Serbian society, but there are still obstacles to overcome, particularly in terms of language and economic disparity. The geopolitical implications of this migration are perhaps the most significant, as the growing Russian presence in Serbia could influence the country's foreign policy and its relations with both Russia and the West. As Serbia navigates its path between its historical ties to Russia and its aspirations for European integration, the role of the Russian diaspora will continue to be a key factor in shaping the country's future.